sort of grade level specific questions that you guys have as well. So I know things kind of change as they get through the travel program. Rules are different on an annual basis. So if you've got anything that's kind of specific to that, I'll be happy to answer those questions as well. One of the biggest questions that I get from pitchers at our camps is kind of interesting to me. It's, do I have to throw from the windup? And my answer is always, well, no, you don't ever really have to do anything. But there is a reason why we throw from the windup, and that's usually to create more velocity. So as soon as we explain that, kids are usually a little bit, at least in a practice setting, more interested in trying it. And for travel coaches at your age level, I would say, in games that for the team feel important, we don't want to force kids to do things that they're not comfortable doing, but we hopefully have some other situations, whether it be practice, whether it be a league game, where we can try to work on things that they're maybe not as comfortable with that might benefit them down the road. So that's kind of my spiel on windup versus stretch. And I'm always just kind of interested in how many kids feel more comfortable in the stretch, and it makes sense because it's less complicated. There are less opportunities to screw up, and some kids can't throw strikes very well from the windup. I just want to talk about a couple of quick mechanics things, and then we'll have Jack show you a couple of them here. The three terms that I'll use on a frequent basis with our high school age pitchers are balance, direction, and momentum. We want to try to maintain all three of those things throughout our delivery, whether it is we're working from the windup, whether it is we're working from the stretch, it doesn't really matter. So again, balance, direction, and momentum. And that's what works for the setting of our season. We have 2 weeks of practice, and then we're playing games, which at our level is not a lot of time. I'm not remolding every pitcher that comes through. There's no right way, there's no perfect way to pitch. They all do different things naturally. Some of them might do weird things or things that we wouldn't, build a pitcher from scratch to do that actually make them good. So that's where we need to exercise a little bit of professional judgment from time to time. If a kid's shoulder is flying open just a little bit, or if it's closed a little bit, but he can still throw strikes and he's got a little bit of movement, we don't need to say, well, you're technically not doing that correctly. I always try to wait for the feedback to tell me what it is that I need to, or not need to change about a kid. So that's kind of my coaching spiel. With all that being said, if we were going to make a pitcher from scratch, he might look a little something like this. Jack, why don't you go ahead and use the white line as a pitching line. And so in terms of going from the windup, which is how we'll start, you can see Jack's got what would be the front edge of the rubber kind of bisecting the front part of his feet. He doesn't have a whole lot more than his heels on the rubber. A lot of kids think that they need to stand on the rubber. A, they don't need to do that, and B, it's actually much more difficult to pitch that way because you can't really get momentum going forward. The rubber is slippery. You guys have probably a lot more experience with that than I do. In any case, you can see his feet are at an angle where he's comfortable. One direction that they should never be pointed is as a right-handed thrower towards third base. So he's going to start either with his toes kind of square to the catcher or maybe a little bit angled towards the first base dugout at about a 45. The reason why Jack feels comfortable that, well, let me ask you, why do you think your feet feel comfortable that way to start, Jack?
I don't know, I've always done it.
Okay, that's a fair answer. The reason why, and he doesn't even know it, is because this is going to help his hips get into the right position as we get the next couple of steps into the delivery. Eventually, his torso is going to want to point this direction, so his feet are giving him a little bit of a head start. So, Jack, why don't you just go ahead and give us your first step, the one you take with your left foot, your rocker there. Okay, so one thing to notice about Jack is his step was, number one, small. Now, the biggest mistake that young pitchers will make on that first step is it's huge. And they think that it needs to be this massive step, often backwards or to the side, because they think that's somehow generating energy or power as they get into their delivery. Really, all this first step is for is timing and allowing my feet and my hips to get into the right position after it. So keep an eye on that. A lot of kids are going to be like this or like this, and that's not what we want. So Jack, go ahead and do that again. His second step is just going to be to turn his foot so it's parallel with the rubber. And now his hips are in that position that I was mentioning at the beginning. And because of the way he started his feet, he was able to do that very easily. He barely has moved them, and now he's already got his hips sort of pointed in the direction that we want to go. Now he would come up into a leg lift, and I would never usually have a pitcher do this. I would just take a quick look at the position that he's in. And his knee is going to be about as high as his hip, somewhere in there. Now you can go ahead and relax that. This too, there's no perfect place to be in terms of the balance point. Guys should get to a position that they're comfortable in their leg lift, at least within kind of a certain range. And so he's really right at about exactly even. That was how I pitched as well. Some kids are going to be quite flexible. They're going to be able to get that knee up over their hip. It's fine. And other kids are going to be a little bit more comfortable with a little bit less exaggerated leg lift. There is kind of a tipping point, right? We want them to get a leg lift, and we want to kind of stay away from just sort of picking your foot up and stepping forward. And the leg lift, the purpose of that is sort of twofold, right? We're developing sort of energy in this back leg here that we're eventually going to use to push off. And then also we're kind of syncing our body up so that our arm can come through at the correct time. So that's the reason for the leg lift. That's part of why throwing from the windup does help us generate a little bit more velocity than from the stretch. But there isn't a perfect position in terms of height to be in. As he gets up to and through his leg lift, go ahead, Jack. He would still be in a good position from a balance standpoint. You know, if you want to take a step behind him, or guys come this way just a little bit. Yeah, just go to your balance point, Jack. In an ideal world, we're still going to be developing a little bit of forward momentum through this position. I've asked him to stop here, so obviously he's not. But when we're in the pitching delivery, we should never actually come to a stopping point. So my request would be, please don't have your pitchers do the old sort of like 3-step drill where they're stopping and starting. We want to try to carry that momentum to remain athletic through the pitching delivery. What I did have him stop there for where his weight and balance would be, and when he truly gets to that point of the balance point up here, he's going to be just slightly drifting forward, but he's still going to have kind of all of that weight right in the center. And you can go ahead and get out to what would a stride position be from there, Jack. And when he gets out to that stride position, and he's still going to have his weight pretty much centered kind of right in the middle. If anything, would be a little bit tilted to the back, maybe just 55-45, 60-40, some way in there. And what we want to stay away from, just show him a position where your weight's way out front, Jack, if you can, yeah. We want to stay away from something like that, and that's problematic. That means your weight has gone forward, you've already delivered a lot of energy towards the plate, and your arm is still back here. Okay, so we want to stay kind of back through that position, and then we're going to be able to explode and go through. I'll just hold your baseball so you don't throw it. Oops. Not that you would anyways. Just give them one full dry wind up here, Jack. Just kind of, yeah. Once you do it once more, and then just sort of kind of hold your finish. I know that you walk off a little bit. Oh, no, when you're all the way done, just kind of hang out in that position. Okay. So, in terms of the keywords, direction is the biggest thing I wanted to point out here. All of Jack's movement kept going from here to there, and that is pretty normal, rational to think about. I'm trying to throw the ball from here to that location. I want to keep as much of my body's direction and energy as I can moving in that direction. So what you will commonly see, and this is an indicator of something that's happening earlier in the delivery, is the guy will finish and he will fall off or wander off to the side. And that's usually because his hips have opened up a little bit too early or too far, and it's also taken his shoulder with it, and it'll be falling off this direction. And that's probably the most common issue that you'll see at your age level that is not easily correctable, but easy to see, and then to try to help. So that's the direction piece of it. Again, it's balance and momentum. There's a balance between those two, right? You want to be able to make sure that you're staying in a roughly centered position at that balance point, and then as he still gets through his stride, and that chest starts to come right over his front leg as he's starting to release the ball. Okay, so that's wind up. Jack, let's just show him a couple of things from the stretch. So first, show him the position from which you would take your sign. Okay, so this is Jack's relaxed position out of the stretch. This now, of course, is when there are runners on base who can steal as soon as he moves. He would be looking in for the sign. Some kids are going to want to really lean in. And others, like Jack, like to stand up straight. Again, there isn't a right or a wrong way between those. It's whatever they're comfortable with. Now go ahead and move to the set, Jack. So Jack's in the set now. From a rules standpoint, and most importantly, he now can really no longer move anything except for his head, right? If he moves his shoulders, if he moves his legs in any way to do anything other than either pick off to first or move to the plate, he has blocked. Okay, so we're trying to stay away from that. So he can look at the runners by using his head, and that's it. As soon as he makes a movement, he's got to finish it. And so you can just show them a delivering the plate here, Jack. And it's really just the second 2/3 of the windup essentially. Jack's got a pretty high leg kick. The only thing, and I would say at 11s and 12s, 10s and 11s is what we have here, right? Yeah. So 10s and 11s, yeah, don't worry about the height of their leg lift yet on a stretch. Yeah, I was getting at a slide step. You can show them a slide step just for curiosity. Don't worry about time to the plate just yet. That'll be a time to iron that out a little bit later on, because they're not breaking on your movement yet, right? Is it when it gets out of his hand or when it crosses the plate or something like that? Is that what those are? Yeah. So how much time his leg lift is taking doesn't yet matter for you guys, so I wouldn't worry about that a whole lot just yet. This is why most guys would be more comfortable from the stretch. We've cut out the first few steps, and that's definitely understandable from a command standpoint. Might have an easier time throwing strikes. They will be sacrificing a little bit of velocity if they never throw from the line. Again, you know your athletes, let them do what's comfortable for them, when they're in game situations. Sorry, let me see kind of how I'm doing on time here. Don't just go about 5 more minutes. Only last couple of things in terms of fielding the position. Our pitchers are also infielders, of course, right? 2 primary ways in which they're going to act in your levels are comebackers, fielding the ball and throwing it to first. Make sure that they're trying to get their body in front of the ball if they can. Not always possible because it gets on them quick, right? You're just trying to knock the ball down. Biggest thing for pitchers, number 1, you've always got more time than what you think you have. And number 2, never compound a fielding mistake with a throwing mistake because you're trying to go too fast. Kids will always, want to sort of throw on the run or never have their feet under them. And we just teach them, make sure, hey, at worst, you're getting 1 good step under you as you sort of pivot and throw to first. At the high school level, what we actually teach them to do if they're fielding off of this way is we just have them keep running and give a little underhand flip to first. Sometimes with the shortness of the bases, you guys don't always have time for that, but that is something that we do. Biggest thing is just make sure that their feet are under them when they turn to the base. The other way in which they will act is on covering first on a ground ball over to first base, their banana route. Jack, I'm going to have you try to visualize something for me here, okay? So come this direction. So you're on the mound here, and first base is right where the corner of the baseline is. You want to just show them a little banana route? Obviously, don't go full speed. Okay, so this is a ground ball to first. Hey, he's taking his banana route. It's in the shape of a banana. That's why we call it that. Biggest thing for kids is make sure that they get to the line so that they can go up the line. They will want to take a straight line to first base because that's the fastest way to get there, right? Unfortunately, that's not the only thing that we're weighing. Number 1, we don't want to get run over, so we're always inside the baseline. And give yourself a few steps to run up it. And then we also have to catch the flip from the first baseman, so we want to have our body in a position where we're able to kind of face him and accept that flip. Other biggest mistake that they'll make is they'll catch the ball, they'll touch the base, and they'll say, we got him out, and they'll just kind of fade off this way. And then the guy runs over him after he's already out. We don't want that either. Okay, so they need to stay in fair territory, stay on the inside of the baseline all the way through the end of the play. So that's a brief bit on pitcher D, probably the most of what you'll need at the 10 and 11-year-old levels. We'll do an overall Q&A kind of at the end, but we do have a couple of minutes here. One last thing, if you want to come a little bit closer, we can show you a couple of grip things here. So we're not really on to breaking balls yet at your level, but of course there's the 4-seam fastball. Some of your kids may want to or enjoy experimenting with a 2-seam fastball. You can either put the fingers sort of right on the seams or cross it this way. Those are both 2 variations on the 2-seam. Jack, why don't you show them how you grip your changeup? This is probably the biggest area in which you can help your kids grow from a pitch development standpoint at 10s and 11s, is developing a changeup. Why don't you turn it so they can see the circle there? So Jack throws a circle changeup, and he actually, perfect. He already does what I was going to have him show you. So kids watch baseball on television, and all the big league guys, they throw the circle change where they connect the thumb and the forefinger. That's really hard to do when you're 10 years old because the ball slips out of your hand. Their hands just aren't big enough to really control this pitch most of the time. And so we would teach kind of what Jack is doing there, maybe even to more of an exaggerated bit where he would put his forefinger actually up a little bit higher on the seam. It's almost just like a four-finger fastball, to some degree. And then you've got your thumb down on the bottom. That's a great place to start with a young kid, for a changeup. Again, take the pressure off of them to try to connect that, because for most of them, that's just going to kind of fly off of this way, and they're going to have a really hard time throwing strikes with it. And then they start trying to grip it way too hard because they're concerned that it's slipping out, and then it bounces, 10 feet short of the plate. So, changeup, huge in terms of their development. The only other thing I would add, and this can be a difficult conversation for them to process sometimes, is, well, which fastball do you throw? Do I throw a four-seam or a two-seam? I want to grip my changeup with the same grip as my fastball. So if I grip a four-seam fastball, even if I was throwing a circle, I would grip it so that the seams are going to come out of my hand in that same rotation. If I throw more two-seam fastballs, I'd try to grip it so that it comes out like a two-seamer. Kids, when they're 10, if you got a good changeup, the hitters are not going to hit it probably no matter what. But as they get older, hitters, that's how we train them to try to pick up different pitches, is they're looking for spin. So if you throw a four-seam fastball and a two-seam changeup, as soon as I see that two-seam movement, I know it's a changeup. So that's kind of a piece that can help them, probably not until they're 14 or 15, but if we can get them comfortable with that at 10s or 11s, that's helpful. 1 minute! I guess we got 1 minute for questions.